Dynamic systems. A mescaline trip report. A couple weeks before the experience, a friend and I took the time to make some Peruvianist tea and ayahuasca. Our original plan was for the both of us to take these a few days later. He would take the ayahuasca, while I would take the Peruvianist tea. Somehow things fell apart and he decided to wait. It was difficult fighting my work schedule and the weather. I thought it over, and after he decided he was not going to do it, I came to the conclusion that it would be best if I went on a solo journey. It has been a while since I took the time to tune myself to the great mystery. My last psychedelic experience took place the beginning of November. The cosmic joke. I have smoked mild doses of DMT twice since November, but I would not say they were significant in any way. I have been too terrified to take the third hit. No matter how many times I smoke DMT, I will always quiver when the time actually comes to do it again. My bowels loosen, my pores open and the sweat starts flowing, and my ego desperately tries to run for higher ground, as if the entire ocean is ready to rise up and annihilate its homeland. Here is an overview of the process I took to make the tea. I used 35 grams of dried tea, Peruvianist outer flesh, not skin but outer inner flesh. I can't remember exactly when I purchased it from a certain online supplier, but I believe it is safe to say it was at least a year ago. The powder has been kept in a cool, dry place, and I expect no loss of mescaline. I did 3 pulls, each with about 1.5 gallons of tap water, not distilled water. They were all done over a similar boil. The first pull was 1.5 hours, the second was 3 hours, and the third was 1.5. I ended up with about 6.5 oz of dark brown, liquid the consistency of heavy whipping cream. I filtered through a handkerchief, 50% cotton, 50% polyester, into a 2.5-gallon bucket. What seemed to work well was to drape the handkerchief over the very wide mouth of the bucket and attach it however possible to the bucket, so my hands could be free during the filtering process. What I then did was pour about a quart of the liquid into the handkerchief. Much of it went through readily, but when it became a goop, I used the surface area of the handkerchief to my advantage and tilted the bucket every which way. This made things go much faster. Not fast, but faster than it would have been. Overall, the system worked fairly well. I definitely had some sediment, approximately 3-4 FL Oz if measured after it has settled. Obviously it's not fluid, but I'm comparing it to fluid, so that's why I say 3-4 FL Oz. But it was easy enough to decant off the liquid after I let the final product, the 6.5 Oz of syrup, sit in the fridge for a couple days. I woke up at 8:00 a.m. and gathered some things for the journey. I took some money, a notebook and a pen, an extra jacket, 2 quarts of water, a lunch, the syrup, and a bottle of cranberry juice to wash it down with. My plan was to go to a large park forest preserve about 1.122 miles away from my home. This park is about 8 miles long and about 1.2 miles wide, and it is all hills, and walk off the trail and relax at a spot that I had scouted out beforehand. It was free from any human interaction. I left at about 8:15 a.m. and arrived at the park around 9:00 a.m. I started towards my planned location, and after realizing that I had forgotten to empty my bowels before I left, proceeded to dig a cat hole and do my business. Too much information. All the while looking around many times, unable to believe that someone wasn't watching me. Afterwards I felt refreshed and decided to find a good place to sit. It was much colder than I anticipated. I was shivering. I took some deep breaths and decided it was time to brave the syrup. I got to the point where there was about 1 Oz of syrup left and decided that I just couldn't do it anymore. The nausea was starting to come on, and there was no way I could avoid puking if I was to combine that with a sip of syrup. It is safe to say that I will never try to drink Pedro syrup again. This is my second experience with syrup. The first drink was fine, but it got progressively worse. I think it took me at least 30-45 minutes to get as far as I did. After each sip, I had to sit and relax and build up my courage enough to even think about taking another. Seeing the cranberry juice didn't help either. It reminded me of wine, and that was the last thing I wanted to think about drinking, besides more syrup, of course. My experiences with wine have been nothing less than vomitrocious. I knew the brew was beginning to affect me when I started giggling for no apparent reason. My body started to feel lighter. This was probably about 15 minutes after I stopped drinking. The birds seemed to have gotten used to my presence at this point and went about their business. Sometimes they were beautiful, sometimes they were very annoying, but no matter what, they were freaking cute. Once the nausea was in full swing, I began to have regrets about drinking the syrup. I was cold and uncomfortable, and I didn't need to add an upset stomach to that. I was also afraid. My ego is a stubborn one, as most are, and has grown used to having control over its world in the last few months. I had forgotten what to expect. Once my frustration peaked and I could no longer stand to be cold, I gathered up some fallen branches from the Douglas firs surrounding me and made myself a bit of a bed. I laid down on top of them, laid my head on my backpack, curled up in a ball and covered myself with my extra jacket. I was going to ride out this nausea and have fun, damn it. Once I did this and built up some body warmth, the nausea seemed to weaken. I felt much more comfortable and I began to cheer up. After a while I looked down at the branches I was laying on and noticed a small bug crawling around. I looked at another spot and noticed another and another. These branches were alive. I stood up and checked my watch. I think it was about 11:45. Somewhere in the 11:00 range. I drank some water and walked away from my things to explore the surrounding area. It was beautiful. I was smiling. It's been a long time since I have smiled and felt content. Slowly but surely I adapted to the mescaline headspace. I found the wave and was riding it for all it was worth. Going with the flow, getting in tune with the forest. I was moving really slowly, taking lots of time to soak in my surroundings. I watched the insects forage for food, I watched the birds sing their songs, I watched the trees sway in the breeze, I curiously watched the squirrels watch me curiously, I watched the down logs decay and give life, I watched the mushrooms spread their spores, I watched the leaves fall, I watched the water trickle down between the hills. I observed everything, and the more I observed, the more I understood how it all worked together as a whole. I was better able to understand my role in the world, the human species' role on the earth. I was able to see an example of something that is perfectly in tune with the energy that flows through it and everything else. And in this way, I was able to tune myself to that energy. The Great Spirit. I felt peace. I was able to stop at any time and simply look at my surroundings for an hour or more, and simply move to another location to do the same thing. At one point, it was probably 1:30 or so, I took out my lunch and opened up my bag of peanuts. Damn, were those some good peanuts. I tried to eat my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but I just couldn't do it. It was way too weird. After I satiated myself, I got up and did some more observing. The closed-eyed visuals and open-eyed visuals were never very strong. This was a light dose, exactly what I needed. After all the DMT I have used, I began to forget that it is possible to take a dose of a psychedelic that won't obliterate my ego like a nuclear bomb would obliterate a mouse. I made my way slowly to a spot above where I entered the forest. It was about 4:00 at this point, and families, people with dogs and runners were starting to populate the trails. I watched these people. Some creeped me out because they seemed so out of tune with everything around them. Others I enjoyed seeing, mainly those with dogs, because they seemed not necessarily peaceful and happy, but much closer to that state than others. I began to get a bit anxious. I wanted to change my surroundings, but didn't want to go back to where I had already been and was fairly close to a popular trail, and was really just too tired to move at all. I was trapped. I was starting to come down, and my normal state of mind was beginning to return. Move, 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 think, 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 stimulation, stimulation, stimulation. I ended up braving the trail and made my way to a bench on the outskirts of a football field-sized grass area near where I entered the forest. The people who wandered by definitely made me a bit tense, but they kept to themselves. I ate the rest of my lunch. PB&J was awesome this time. Drank some water and just sat and contemplated my next actions. I looked down and saw a worm near my feet. I watched it while at the same time trying not to look too strange to passers-by. It was an amazing creature. It seemed to be able to move both ends of its body with equal coordination. It continuously buried its head into what I thought was stone, but turned out to be a thin layer of mud and leaf bits between the stones, but yet level to the rocks. The mud was much like mortar. It would seemingly plunge into a rock, and just as my eyes would open real wide, it would pop out from the underneath a bit of leaf, not rock. The tricky bastard. It was about 5:00 at this point, and I felt it was best to head into the world. There was an art fair of sorts happening in the hip part of town, and I figured that would be a great place to end the day. There was some amazing art and great people. I took a city bus to that area and stopped by a friend's home and knocked on the door. She invited me in, and we decided to go explore the fair that she has not yet seen that day. She ran into many friends, and while she talked I simply stared at random things and smiled. She's a very social person, while I am a bit of a recluse. We bought some bubble tea and complained about it. They were out of tapioca gels, and we had to bear with a mix of coconut and aloe gels. Meh. It was okay, but nothing like the marble-sized boogers that are the tapioca gels. I was satisfied nonetheless. We walked back to her place, cooked some edamame, made some tea and watched American Beauty. I had never seen it. FYI, great movie. Afterwards I passed out on her couch and woke up to another beautiful day on Earth.